General Motors announced today it is slashing its workforce by as many as 14,000 employees, including a quarter of its executives, and shuttering several plants in North America. At least 5 passenger car models will be eliminated, resulting in shutdowns next year at 3 plants in Detroit, Northeast Ohio, and Ontario. 2 other U.S. plants are on notice. This would be the company's biggest shakeup since it faced bankruptcy a decade ago. Last year, on a trip to Ohio, President Trump assured residents near one GM plant that he was working to keep jobs and even add more. Today, he described what he has told GM CEO Mary Barra.
Well, we don't like it. I believe they'll be opening up something else, and I was very tough. I spoke with her when I heard they were closing, and I said, you know, this country's done a lot for General Motors. You better get back in there soon. That's Ohio, and you better get back in there soon. So we have a lot of pressure on them. You have senators, you have a lot of other people, a lot of pressure.
David Shepardson of Reuters News is here to help explain what is behind these moves. Welcome back to the NewsHour, David. So what is being cut at GM? What kinds of jobs?
There's 2 parts. One are, as you said, the car production factories. You've got 5 factories that are building cars like the Chevy Volt, the Impala, cars that are not selling well. And in fact, across the industry, car sales have dramatically declined as people buy more crossovers, SUVs, and pickup trucks. The other big basket are salaried workers. And so of the 54,000 North American salaried workers, GM is going to cut about 15%. That's 8,000 jobs. Of those, roughly 2,000 have taken voluntary buyouts. So that leaves about 6,000. Then the other 8,000 or so jobs are these production jobs at these 5 plants, plus the 2 supporting plants, plus 2 other plants outside of North America that are to be closed and identified sometime in the next year.
So people who work at plants, and when you say salary jobs, white-collar jobs, what do these people do?
Engineering, financial, accounting, all sorts of white-collar jobs that are critical to the industry.
And GM said today that, part of what you just said, that the certain kinds of cars are just not selling anymore. Is that the whole story here?
That's part of it. And that is a big part, certainly, that people are not buying the small cars and they're buying the bigger cars that are on the same platform so that people can sit up higher. But it's also about GM moving toward the future. They're going to take a big chunk of that money and invest in electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. GM could start as early as next year a self-driving car ride-sharing fleet in San Francisco. And so part of it is about addressing this future shift of mobility away from the traditional, human-driven car. But it's also recognition that U.S. car sales are flattening, potentially declining. I mean, we've been in a rising auto market since the Great Recession. And so everybody's nervous, all the companies, about this shift, and no one wants to be caught flat-footed, and that's why you see GM and other companies, this is the biggest step, taking early cost savings now before there's a recession or a big fall off in auto demand.
Does it represent a miscalculation on GM's part? I mean, you have politicians, of course, the president was critical. Right. You had Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio saying this is the worst kind of corporate greed, and other politicians on both sides of the aisle criticizing.
Look, there's a lot of anger, and GM, obviously 10 years ago got a big government bailout, and taxpayers were on the hook for about $11 billion. But GM would say today, we have to be profitable. We cannot continue building cars that people aren't buying. And this is a publicly traded free market economy, and these are cars people don't want to buy. But you're right, given that gas prices have been low for several years, GM and a lot of other companies probably didn't predict quite fast enough the shift away from cars and toward these larger vehicles.
And so does this represent what's going on across the industry, that we're going to see this kind of thing in other automakers as well?
So we've already seen Ford and Fiat Chrysler announce that they're abandoning nearly all their sedans in North America. Other companies like Toyota have said that they are going to reduce their focus on cars toward these larger cars. So we have not seen this level of job cuts yet. And it is striking that given the political ramifications you said, and that President Trump and others are really, attacking GM, that they would do this given that this is certainly to be an issue in the 2020 election.
So when President Trump and others say, well, they need to just make up for this by making other kinds of vehicles, is that realistic?
In an answer, no. Not without spending a lot of money. So in the case of Lordstown, that plant in Northeast Ohio, you'd need a new paint shop because it's not big enough to build those larger vehicles. That could cost $1 billion or more. Retrofitting this plant to build bigger vehicles would cost hundreds of millions or even more. So you're talking about a very large investment taking several years. And the problem for auto companies is, what's auto demand going to be in 2 years when you're done? Is it going to be more? Is it going to be less? And do you want to invest in more production capacity if the market is going down?
Well, in the meantime, it represents a lot of pain for these 14,000 people who are going to be losing jobs.
And it's remarkable, too, that GM is taking this very tough step a month before Christmas, in the middle of the political season. But it does represent that there's a lot of nervousness, despite the economy and unemployment being low overall, that there are places where the economy may not be as strong as we necessarily believe.
Well, yeah, we're all soaking it in right now.
Right.
David Shepardson, thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy.